Welcome, y'all. As we close our wayfinding meditation series this month, we turn toward one of the most ancient tools of navigation, ritual. Today, I am joined by artist and ritualist Schildkret for a conversation about navigating transitions, not through certainty or direction, but through stillness, curiosity, and reverence for the unknown. Together, we explore what it means to linger in the in-between, to ask better questions instead of demanding answers, and to allow nature, art, and ritual to become waypoints when the path disappears beneath our feet. This conversation is both an invitation and a pause, an island in time to remember that sometimes the most powerful way to move forward is to stop, to wonder, and ask, is this time different? Welcome. You are listening to Our Mindful Nature, a podcast helping healers and those searching for healing respond to anxiety, overwhelm, or depression with nature-inspired meditations for better mental health. I'm your host and meditation teacher, Meryl Arnett. This podcast is recorded from my live Monday night meditation class. If you would like to access today's meditation practice or nature soundscape as a standalone audio file for your daily use, please subscribe to my newsletter at merylarnett.com. All right, y'all, grab a cup of tea, pop in your headphones, and find a comfy seat. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm so happy you're returning.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, I was thinking today, I have been lucky enough to have a handful of people that have returned for a second or even a third conversation. And it's really cool to see how conversations expand and shift over years. So I'm excited for
They're
this.
alive, right? They
Yeah,
grow. Yeah, they're rooted, they grow, they change. Yeah, I'm
yeah.
happy to keep it alive with you.
Yeah, thank you. So we started chatting over email several months ago, like late 2024, I think. And there was a line in your initial email that really jumped out at me. And this is where I want to start. You wrote to me, I'm on a mission to support individuals navigating transitions and healing through ritual.
Mhm.
And we didn't know what late January, February, March, April, and so on was going to look like in 2025. And so now here we are, late spring, navigating a whole lot of transition and chaos. And I'm really interested in how you feel about your work in this particular moment. What's speaking to you in this moment about your work?
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, when you first said that, when you just reread my comment to me, because I forgot what I wrote, I'd say the first thing that came to mind was, is this time different? Is it? It's funny that that's the question that's coming up for me right now. I just last week opened in a major art exhibit in San Francisco. And without going too deeply into it, it's been in the works for 2 years. And it was inspired by my desire to reinvent one of my cultural ritual objects, a Jewish ritual object called the Seder plate, which is connected to Passover. I knew I wanted to play with that because it's very much for us an altar on the table, and the objects on it are organic and grown, and it's a kind of like my cultural altar, impermanent art altar, which is what I do, and I knew I wanted to reinvent that. I didn't know what I wanted to do. Thank God we won a grant where I could dream for over a year into the vision. And actually dreaming into that vision, in the middle of that dreaming, October 7th happened in Israel. And Fast forward like almost 6 months later, just a rise of anti-Semitism globally. And then last year at my own table, at my own Passover table, there was argument and there was division and there was like too much certainty and opinion at the table. And it felt like my table broke in half. And that experience, which was deeply disturbing, and I had to mend a lot of friendships and relationships because friends became strangers at the table. Um, that unfortunate experience actually gave birth to the vision for this art installation, which was the reinvention of the Seder plate into six broken tables, right? And so in the exhibit, the audience goes, they enter into the room ritually. They go through each table, and each table is set like it is for Passover, beautiful dishes and wine and whatnot, except all the tables are broken in half and there's shards emerging from the broken pieces. And then the elements from the Seder plate are emerging from the shards. And so, for instance, one table has bones just jutting out of them. Another table has eggshells just sitting on the edge of the shards. Another table has salt water dripping from the shards, right? And so it's very interactive. There's a whole sound experience with it. And it ends, I'm getting to your question.
I'm
It,
loving this.
it ends after they move to the plant table, which has all of these greens that are growing from the broken pieces, almost like an apocalypse where nature is just kind of growing from the broken back whole again. Um, After that, there's a light, it's called a gobo, which means like it's a projection of light that has words on it. And it's both in Hebrew and in English. And it says, in Hebrew, it says manishtana. And in English, it means what makes this time different. And so as they leave this experience, which is deeply unsettling, provocative, kind of it's art, so it's including everything. It's not taking a side. It's just helping people experience the brokenness of this time. The question that they're being asked as they leave this ritual space is, what is this time different? Is it? And if so, if this time is different, what is required of us now that is different than other times? And that is the landscape of ritual, right? Like rituals are done most of the time to mark entering into something new and exiting something else. It is the landscape of the interstitial, of the in between. And that could be as easy as like waking up and starting your day or ending your day and going to bed. I do a nighttime ritual, takes me 10 seconds, but it's a marker that I'm leaving the day and I'm entering into the night. And then ritual asks that question, like, is this different? Yes, I don't have any responsibilities. I don't need to worry. I can put down my to-dos. Like at nighttime, that is different. So ritual is always asking us that question, is this time different? And so when it comes to your question about, you raised up post January 15th or whatever, whenever we entered into this chaos, the question is this time different? And if so, what different skills and different communications and different awareness and different speeds are needed from us in this different landscape? So instead of me answering the question, I'm doing something that's very enculturated for me, which is to ask your question with a question and ask, like, I don't know, what do you think? Like, I'm not here with answers, but I'm here with curiosity. Is this time different?
There's there's so much in that response, Dave. And I want to respond to a couple
Sorry, and you're
pieces.
welcome.
No, I love it. Thank you. I want to acknowledge, like, I feel a huge amount of emotion from the description of that art installation. I'm also Jewish. I can't remember if we talked about
Oh, I
this.
didn't know that.
And that I can feel the power in what you described and in posing the questions. So thank you for that. And I'm like, I'm verklempt. And Is this time different? I don't have answers.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what I feel is that,
Well, can I
uh,
stop you there? Do you mind?
yeah, sure, please.
Because what you just said is instead of that being almost like a road bump, which I think maybe was intentional, I would ask you to consider that as a navigational system for the times. Meaning, I don't have answers, right? Instead of like, unfortunately, I don't have the answer for you. Could it be that that is actually what should guide us? Because there's 10,000 answers around us every day, and
Yes.
opinions and certainties, and I know what's right, and I know what, right? And like so little curiosity, so little nuance, so little willingness to say, I don't know, let's wonder about this together. So instead of that being the road bump, could that be yeah, no, I don't have answers either. But isn't it something to wonder about that this time could be different, right? Isn't that something to wonder about? And if so, what does that mean for us? And so I would like to just pull the thread through, especially for those that are listening, and suggest that in these times, and especially if we are entering into new times, which is the landscape of ritual, could it be that wonder, curiosity, awe, humility, those are the skills of these times? Not more certainty, not more opinion, not more hardening of our hearts, not more polarization. Can we resist the urge on social media and in our communities and families to be on a quote unquote side because it's safer in that way? And can we create more landscape for wonder?
Day, I recently read one of a million lists that are out there right now about ways of taking care of ourselves or ways of resisting. There's all these lists everywhere, most of which have some lovely things and a lot of repetition. But there was this one that really stuck with me, and I'm thinking of it as you're talking. And one of the points on the list was to create a folder, whether on your phone or physical, and name it waypoints and put things in it that help you navigate.
Hmm.
And I loved that invitation so much. And I feel a little bit of that as you're talking. It was just, it's not a map with like, here's the straight line and you're going to go right here and know exactly where you're going to end up. But can we start to gather pieces that help us find our way?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, help us find, I mean, even that's wonderful. I want to just, period. That's great. And I write and teach quite a bit about the spell of destination addiction. And that, the modality that I teach, morning altars, it's the first step is wonder and wander, right? So it's about kind of stepping out of the need for answers, stepping out of the need for destination, allowing ourselves to meander both in conversation and with our bodies physically, and exercise the muscle of not knowing, not from a place of a problem, but from a place of exploration, discovery, relationships, like all of these things. And so, navigate my almost allergy to talks of navigations is that there's a there, right? That there's like someplace we're trying to get to, trying to get back to, maybe even. And I think that's a very problematic perspective. Now, navigational systems, that's the language I used before when I talked about curiosity. Like, yes, we do need to know how to move through the times that we're in, as long as there isn't a deep hope that we get there. Because that's where people really underneath, they're like, they just want to hurry this part up. They just want to get through the hard part so we can get to the thing that we really want to get to, right? And that's where it can become dangerous. And so the skills, the navigational skills, and from a ritualistic standpoint, are slowing down, right? We're entering into something else. Um, Inventorying and letting go. What is needed? Do I need to carry this mindset with me? Do I need to carry these relationships? I don't know. Do I need to be on social media all the just getting a sense of inventory of what's needed, asking fundamental questions that you think you know the answers to, but resurrecting those questions. Um, so these are my navigational systems when it comes to entering into moments of transition. And transition, the most important thing around transitions, and this is so easy and so hard at the same time, is that the first and last thing, the question you should be asking is, am I in a transition? Because if you don't ask the question, more often than not, you assume you're through it, right? Or you haven't entered into it. But if we can keep asking, like, are we still in the transition? Are we still in an in-between space? That can help inform us of these other skills that are needed. So we have to keep on asking that without fear and without a hope that we're through it, you know? And in some ways, it's a cultivation of a skill of tolerance for uncertainty, right? And that's what's needed right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I when I talk about meditation, often what I talk about is that this practice of being still and being with yourself as it is in the moment, it's this practice of building a tolerance for the truth of what we're experiencing in any given moment. So I think that's a really interesting overlap.
Yeah.
And then I want you to talk a little bit more about what it means to incorporate, I think I want to use the word incorporate ritual into these transitional moments when it's not, it's interesting because to say a transition like I'm 40 and I'm becoming 41 is a very defined transition. And what we're talking about is not a defined amount of time. And so what does that look like
But
to bring,
not all of them are. For
yeah.
instance, like I'll give you a really complicated transition that I'm in, but I can simplify it with another example. But my mother's had dementia now for 6 years, 7 years. Um, she's been slowly losing her mind. And, are we still in this? Like it's very unclear where we are with my mom right now, like yes, we're still in dementia. Yes, she's still alive. Is she still is she still the mother I knew? Not really. There's a lot of uncertainty inside of this transition. The same thing, by the way, when my father died, like did the transition of my father's death, did that end the moment he died? Did that end after the funeral? Did that end a week later, a month later, a year later? Am I still in my father's death transition? Sometimes I am, and so not all, and most actually, I would say, are not clearly defined transitional. I'm in it, I'm out of it. And so much of my work, I just taught a New Year's workshop in January. We did it for 4 weeks. Every time we gathered, I asked one simple question: are we still in the new year? Because the workshop went into February, you know? And it's like, if we are still in the new year, then certain things are available to us. And if we're not, then we're in the year and we can't be in the transitional moments where things are still malleable. And so a lot of my work when it comes to ritual and transitions is asking people to consider softening the boundary of when it started and when it ends, and therefore not being so sure and staying curious. Am I still in this? And it gives so much more space and permission than otherwise. Then, oh, I need to know the answers, or I need to know where I am, or I need to know what this is. One more example. My best friend, who I've known now for 30 years, I introduced her to her husband 29 years ago. I helped her get divorced 2 years ago, and she's 2 years out of her divorce from him. And she's still very much in the question of who is he to me? Right? The transition from the divorce, that didn't end when they separated. That didn't end when, they got divorce papers. They still have two kids together. Like, she's still in that consideration. And a lot of that is coming from me, like saying, don't be so convinced that you're on the other side of this, And so ritual helps us mark transitions so that we can be in the interstitial, in between, fuzzy, unknown, hazy. I don't need to know. I'm dreaming. This is like I'm kind of in the just in that stumbliness of the in-between space. That has a place, but it doesn't when we think we should be out of it. So the ritual marks a boundary so we can allow ourselves to be properly in the in-between.
So, can you share with us an example of a ritual that comes to mind for you, to create that sense of softening and lingering in the space?
Sure. Yeah, there are rituals. Let's see what comes to mind now. I mean, I gave you the example of the nighttime ritual, but I think I'd like to give you a better example of something that allows us to be in that in-between space. Um, Let me think. There's a ritual for death anniversaries. Um, I wrote about one in my book specifically for pets. And there is a time in the year when my last dog, when I put her down, and um, and the ritual that I do that I well, so when I put her down, I did a ritual where I actually took her leash and I cut it and I wore it for a year. And the reason I did that is because I was inspired by my own culture's um, rending of garments when there's a death. And we do, in my culture, we do, and in your culture, our culture, we do, I think, death pretty well. We don't do dying well at all. But when it comes to death, it's very human centric. We don't really have a lot of tradition or guidance around animals. And so when I put my dog down, my last dog down, um, there was nothing really to do, but it was like the most heartbreaking transition I had been in, definitely since my father. Um, and so I knew I wanted to do something. I knew I was in this in-between space. I was grieving. I was missing her. Um, I was like really in a hard place with that death, with this little one. And so, in the spirit of rending garments, I took her leash, which as soon as she died had no purpose to it, and I cut off the part with the little clip, and I wore that clip with a little bit of her leash on my jacket for a year. What did that do? What did that mark? Going back to your question. So, the first thing it did was it reminded me that I was grieving, right? So for a year, I gave myself a year because I loved her so much, for a year to grieve. Why did I need a reminder? Because it's very easy to get seduced by everyday life, where the to-do lists and and meetings and taxes and emails and like helping repairing things in my household, helping with my community. Like it's very easy to leave that space of grief. Wearing this leash reminded me I am still very much in an in-between space. I'm grieving. I don't know how to be social some of the time. I don't, some of the time things are messy and that's okay, right? But what else does that do, wearing the leash? It also is it can be, after some conversation, but it can be an identifiable thing to someone else. So I've been in more than one situation where someone would come up to me and say, "What are you wearing?" What that question does is it lets me remind myself that I'm grieving. In between that, in that interstitial space. Number two, it informs them of where I am, so they can relate to me differently. And then the third thing it does is it gives me an opportunity to remember my beloved, right? To tell her story and to, and that is really, really, really important in the space of grief, is to be witnessed and to tell our stories. So just to going back to your question, because it took me a
Yeah.
second to be like, what do I want to share? You know, the markings help us identify boundaries so that we can allow ourselves to be properly in the space, in the in-between space. And so that leash example is a like a really beautiful boundary marker.
So beautiful. And, Day, I'm so grateful for this conversation. Thank you. And I don't know that I would have necessarily been able to articulate this until this moment. But I'm realizing and I'm voicing what I was believing, because maybe there are other listeners who have been thinking in the same way I have. I have realized that I have been looking at ritual as an end marker
Ah,
and not as in that example you gave, I could completely feel the space that allowed. And it was not I'm going to do this thing to say that now I am done
right.
grieving and moving on, right? And that's such a huge shift. I can feel how different it feels to think about ritual allowing us to hold a broader space versus mark the end of something and the start of something new.
Mhm.
And that feels unbelievably important for where we
Mhm.
are right now.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it is the bookends of a container. And it's this is a quote from Rabbi Joshua Heschel referring to the Sabbath, but I think it's applicable here too. He calls the Sabbath, but I'm calling ritual space, an island in time, right? It is just a temporary island that we can stand on in the midst of an ocean of uncertainty, but it gives us a place to stand temporarily so that we can be as we are, rest, slow down, make meaning, find beauty, connection, be witnessed, all of the things that these in between spaces need of us. But they create these temporary sacred spaces, pardon the popular term these days, unfortunately, but it creates an island in time. And the island is timelessness. That is what the island is. When we're grieving or celebrating, or when there's things changing, we need to step out of some of it a lot of the time so we can make sense of things that don't make sense, right?
Yeah.
We need those reprises. We can't just carry on with every day and make sense of what's happening.
Yeah.
So we need to have these little, or sometimes big, spaces where we can get lost, not know, dream, wander, play, experience, all of the things, feel, so that when we move from that temporary island in time back into time, we can carry more understanding and more meaning with us. And that can help us move through what we're in.
How would you guide listeners to, because what I'm sensing is, and maybe I'm wrong, so correct me if I'm wrong, please, but I'm sort of feeling like this invitation is also an invitation for the individual to create what is needed in that ritual. Is that right? And if so, how would you guide us to create something that feels like that container?
Well, I guess the question it's not wrong. You asked me if you're asking the wrong question. I think the question itself has a bit of a destination to it. And look, let me back up and say when we're talking about ritual, it's really important to recognize that most don't get off the ground, right? Just because there is a ritual, it doesn't necessarily mean it's meaningful. I've been in my fair share of people creating rituals where I'm like, what is happening here? I don't understand, or I don't want to be here, or whatever it is. It doesn't just because it's made doesn't mean it there's liftoff. Um, Rituals are really created and or passed down because they respond profoundly to the moment and the needs of the moment and the needs of the people. So when it comes to crafting a ritual, rather than me trying to make up something now that would be meaningful to, I don't know, 10,000 listeners or however many people are listening to this conversation, I would much rather speak to the capacity to make ritual rather than the ritual itself, because it's the same thing as like cooking. Like my interest, and going back to the email that I sent you about, I mean, the essence of the email I sent you was like, we need a ritual renaissance in the culture. We need to really become better practitioners of ritual so that we can navigate these times that we're in, and both personally and collectively. The thing is that how do we navigate, how do we become um, how do we participate in the ritual renaissance? We have to learn how to craft our own rituals, not just the ones that are passed down, although those are important, but some of them need to be reinvented. As I told you from my Passover Seder story, like I wanted to reinvent an old ritual object. But the thing is, why do we need to learn how to craft our own rituals? It's the same thing as cooking. When we learn how to cook, even scrambled eggs, we can feed ourselves, we can nourish ourselves. We're not dependent on other people to do it. Same thing with ritual. When I say ritual, I mean making meaning, right? So how do we make meaning with our personal lives or our collective lives? We have to attempt to make something small at first, not fancy, not based on other people's cultures or customs, something deeply important to us. And how do we do that? By exercising a capacity to be creative. What lies at the heart of ritual is imagination, right? We're in the realm of symbols. We're in the realm of metaphors. We're in the realm of things that are not utilitarian or rational, but that are meaningful because they mean something to us. So the question is, like, what's little things that are meaningful to you? Like, for instance, that ribbon example, that leash was deeply meaningful to me. Throwing it away was like an assault on my love of my dog. I held that leash every day for 16 years, twice a day on dog walks. And I knew I wanted to wear something that would be meaningful to me. So I just thought, how can I reinvent the leash? Right? And so I cut it and I wore it. And it's very simple, but it's deeply meaningful. But that might not be meaningful to like 99% of your listeners. But the question is, well, then what's meaningful to you? Right? And so there is a need to try things out and to imagine and to not get so stuck on things being, right or done according to blah, blah, blah. But to me, as speaking to you as an artist as well, like imagination has a role to play in ritual. But so does um, the need to make it meaningful to you. Right. So that's why I'm not prescribing something here. I'm describing something. But the better lane that I'm way more inspired by to pass on is imagination and creativity here.
I love that. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Day, you know what we didn't talk about, which I feel very remiss in not discussing hardly at all, so we should do it before we end, is we have not talked about nature,
Oh,
which
okay.
is very present in both of our
Yeah.
both of our works. And I want to just weave that in as we sort of tie this conversation off as, and it's one of the places that I personally go
Mhm.
to create space for myself just to be, is to step outside of the walls and the stuff and the demands. And so let's have a little bit of a conversation about how we might bring our relationship to nature into this conversation of sort of slowing down, reconnecting, holding ourselves in this transitional space.
Yeah, I mean, this is the preeminent relationship that we should be practicing daily. Especially those of us that either live in places with deep nature disconnection, which is most of us, especially those of us that are where our ancestors have been deracinated from the places that they called home for hundreds of, or if not thousands of years. And especially if we're looking to find a way through these times and and in that continue to cultivate a sense of peace and creativity and connection and resourcefulness and resilience. This is the daily relationship. And so, yeah, I'd say my work is like the number one thing that I am teaching these days in my teacher trainings, um, is first and foremost cultivating a sense of relationship with the place, not from a place of certainty, but from a place of wonder. And to the skills that we need to use to navigate the times that we're in right now. And I've named many throughout this conversation. Those are the skills to practice in relationship with the living world, right? So we get to exercise those skill sets outside, and then we get to apply them to our culture, our society, our communities, our personal relationships. And one of them, and I'll name two, which is the heart and soul of my work in the world. Number one, the heart is wonder. So what does it mean to be in a state of deep, profound curiosity and in relationship with the living world, and then apply that skill of curiosity to your partner, to your parents, to your children, to your boss, to your clients, etc. What does it mean to be in a state of childlike wonder, of awe, of curiosity, of interest, of leaning in? That's number one. And that's the heart of my work. The soul of my work is, what does it mean to be in relationship with impermanence, with change, right? Nature is the preeminent teacher for us of being in a relationship with change. Everything's moving, everything's changing all of the time. I've had my fair shares of encounters in nature where I want things to go a very different way, and it goes the complete opposite way than I prefer. And I have to wrestle with my own relationship to preference, to um, longevity, to my resistance to change, all of these things. And so the soul of my work, because all of my work is really comes down to impermanence, how do we relate to change? And then I circle back to my first skill, which is wonder, right? We have to practice being in a wondrous relationship with change. And she, they, whatever gender you want to call the living world is the playground to practice wonder and to be in a wondrous relationship with impermanence. So get outside.
Day, what incredible waypoints you've shared today. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
This has been so rich. I wonder if there's anything I didn't ask you about that you really wanted to talk about or bring up.
Um, that's a great question. I think in terms of my own personal both gifts that and wound that I'm wrestling with these days. Um, and so I'm bringing this up because I want to name it for myself,
Please.
is in the midst of it all, how and when do we rest? And rest is a really important part of this work. It's a really important part of resilience and it's a really important part of like keeping our humanity. And it's something I struggle with because I'm so impassioned with purpose in my life, and I have a lot of energy, but it's been a real journey for me to let go. And so, and rest, that's the heart of it, right? Is like there's only, there's an old, like 1,000-year-old Jewish proverb, which is, it's not your job to finish the task, but neither are you free to neglect it. And I think that's a really important, piece of wisdom from 1,000 years ago, which lives at the center of this conversation and the conversations I'm having just with myself right now, which is like, what is our role? Obviously, we need to participate in these times, but knowing that our participation is a very limited engagement and that we can't finish it, but we should not participate because we can't finish it.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I have been thinking a lot about sort of one end of this space being totally overwhelmed withdraw, and the
Mhm,
other end of the space being the always on activism.
mhm.
And what is this bridge in the middle of the two? And rest is a piece of that, a huge piece. And it's real rest,
Mhm,
nourishing rest, right?
mhm.
That makes a piece of that bridge to me.
Yeah, nourishing rest and a willingness to surrender control.
Yeah.
And that also, speaking of, that's kind of the conversation I was having about impermanence with the living world is like, there's been so many times where I want things to go a certain way and they don't, and I have to continue to loosen my grip on things. And rest is the ultimate, I mean, it's the many, many practices, they're little deaths, they're the many practices of letting go of control and kind of allowing ourselves to sink back into the greater void, and so that we might wake up tomorrow and pursue again our purpose or our gifts or justice or whatever it is. But it's it's essential for our own staying connected to our own humanity must include the limitation of our reach, you know? So rest is that. It's like, there's only so much I can do. Yeah. And I'm practicing this too. I'm speaking from the from the with a shovel in my hand and I'm like, I'm down too.
Dave, thank you. Thank you for your
Yeah.
time and for engaging in this conversation. It's so rich and such a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Listeners, links will be in the show notes so you can learn more about Day and his work. Day, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me again.
Thanks for listening, y'all. This conversation with Day reminds us that wayfinding isn't always about forging ahead. It's about how we meet the in-between. Here are 3 takeaways that I'm carrying and I hope you carry after this episode. Number 1, ritual isn't just a marker of endings. It's a container for lingering, feeling, and making meaning when life is uncertain. 2, nature invites us to practice wonder and embrace impermanence, 2 essential skills for navigating transitions. And 3, not having the answers isn't a failure. It can be the beginning of deeper connection, curiosity, and healing. If today's conversation spoke to you, I hope you'll join me again next week as we begin a brand new meditation series, From Chaos to Calm, a weekly invitation to soften, steady, and come home to yourself no matter what the world is doing outside. Until then, may you walk gently, wait patiently, and let wonder guide your way. Thanks for listening to Our Mindful Nature. If you would like to receive today's meditation practice and nature soundscape as standalone audio files for your daily practice, please subscribe to my newsletter at merylarnett.com. It's free and you'll receive a new practice each week. Our Mindful Nature is recorded on Muskogee land and is produced with the support of Nick McMahon and Brianna Nielsen. Deep gratitude is offered to acoustic ecologists Nick McMahon and Gordon Hempton for the use of their nature field recordings in many of these episodes. We release a mini episode that's just the meditation, no chatter beforehand, every Monday. And every Thursday, we release a full episode with a meditation class or interview. I look forward to practicing with you again soon.